Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is literally one of the most incredible economic underdog stories of the modern era. We're looking at the dramatic rise, the devastating fall, and the stunning rebirth of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. You probably know them better as the Baltic Tigers.
So how exactly did three collapsing Soviet states become Europe's ultimate economic success story? I mean, think about it. Back in 1991, these three nations had just scraped back their independence from a collapsing Soviet Union. They were entirely dependent on Soviet raw materials, their institutions were practically non-existent, and their economies, well, they were in absolute freefall. Fast forward to today, and they stand as modern, high-tech European powerhouses. How on earth did they pull that off?
Well, let's dive right in with a number that will absolutely blow your mind: 1,000%. Yeah, you heard that right. That was the devastating inflation rate these countries faced in 1992, right before they managed to establish their own central banks and currencies. They had to cut ties with a hyperinflating Russian ruble immediately, just to even have a fighting chance at survival. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the birth of the Tigers. Second, the 2008 crash and recovery. Third, 2 decades of EU success. Fourth, the demographic challenge. And finally, the EU federalization debate. Chapter 1. The Birth of the Tigers, Breaking from the Soviet Past. To truly break from their past, these nations embraced a radical shock therapy approach, something economists often call the Washington Consensus. Basically, they just ripped the Band-Aid right off. Estonia abolished virtually all foreign trade tariffs, making it Europe's only truly free trading country at the time. They introduced simple flat income taxes, which, by the way, currently sit as low as 15% in Lithuania. They rapidly privatized state assets, and crucially, they completely rebuilt their military and security services from scratch. This totally severed ties with their Soviet past and drastically reduced corruption. These bold, sweeping moves were the spark that ignited the initial Tiger economic boom, catapulting their growth rates straight into the double digits.
Chapter 2. The 2008 Crash and Recovery, Enduring the Global Financial Crisis. Now take a look at this massive V-shaped economic plunge. Between 2004 and 2007, growth in the Baltics was booming. But when the 2008 global liquidity freeze hit, these highly open economies suffered a terrifying drop. I mean, in 2009 alone, Latvia's GDP plummeted by nearly 20%, and Estonia and Lithuania weren't far behind. We're talking about one of the deepest recessions anywhere in the world. But look at the right side of that V. That is a miraculous, rapid economic rebounds that followed just a couple of years later, making them the fastest recovering economies in the entire European Union by 2011. So you've got to wonder, how did they bounce back so incredibly fast? Well, they swallowed some seriously tough medicine. While a lot of international experts were practically begging them to devalue their currencies, the Baltic states flat out refused. Instead, they went with internal devaluation. They enacted massive budget cuts, laid off public workers, and embraced extreme austerity, all to keep their currency pegs intact so they could eventually join the Eurozone. It was counterintuitive and frankly highly painful, but it worked. It restored their growth much faster than the rest of Europe. Chapter 3. 2 decades of EU success, integration and technological booms. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is their incredible fiscal discipline. While they were busy integrating into the EU, they didn't rack up massive bills doing it. By 2014, the EU average public debt was sitting pretty heavy at 87% of GDP. But the Baltics? Totally different story. Latvia and Lithuania were hovering around a very healthy 40%, and Estonia sat at a truly staggering 10.4%. They basically proved to the world that you can have rapid, explosive growth without drowning your nation's future in government debt. But joining the EU wasn't just about following new rules. It brought in massive financial backing, 20 billion euros. That massive figure represents the EU cohesion policy investments in Lithuania alone over the last 2 decades, and there's another 10 billion currently being invested. These funds were pumped directly into infrastructure, education, and local businesses, literally helping to triple Lithuania's GDP per capita. And all this investment, it translated into real-world futuristic success. Estonia sparked a global tech boom, famously birthing the communication giant Skype. Lithuania has emerged as a global heavyweight in both fintech and cutting-edge laser technologies. All 3 of these countries rank in the top 25 globally for ease of doing business. Plus, their education systems, especially Estonia's, boast exceptional PISA scores, meaning their youth are highly competitive on the global stage today. Chapter 4. The Demographic Challenge, The Human Cost of Open Borders. Now, while freedom of movement is a really celebrated right within the EU, for the Baltics, it led to staggering human capital flight. Just imagine losing 1 in 4 of your neighbors. That's exactly what happened in Latvia, which lost 25% of its population between 1989 and 2014 as citizens sought higher wages abroad. Lithuania lost 21% and Estonia lost 17%. That is a massive drain on the workforce and a deeply painful demographic shift for such small nations to endure. Thankfully, their rising wealth has largely stabilized that emigration in recent years. But, that creates a brand new dilemma. Because their living standards have risen so dramatically, they are now becoming destination countries. Under the new EU Pact on Migration and Asylum, these small nations are actually mandated to integrate a set quota of new immigrants from third countries. Managing this influx presents complex new economic and social integration challenges, especially for populations that have historically been entirely focused on immigration, not immigration. Chapter 5: The EU Federalization Debate: Efficiency versus Sovereignty. So, what exactly is EU federalization? It's a political movement aimed at transferring more decision-making and governance powers away from national capitals to centralized EU institutions in Brussels. Proponents of this, particularly larger nations like France and Germany, argue that as the EU expands, centralizing power is absolutely necessary to keep the entire bloc efficient and governable. Without it, they argue, nothing will ever get done. Let's look at how this works in practice. Currently, on sensitive issues like foreign policy, the EU uses unanimity voting. That means 100% agreement is required, effectively giving every single nation a veto. The proposed shift is to something called qualified majority voting, requiring 55% of states representing 65% of the EU population to pass a measure. Now, while this definitely speeds up decision-making, you can easily see the concern for the Baltics. It would strip smaller states of their veto power, making it entirely possible for larger nations to just outvote them on crucial history-making issues. And this federalization debate spills directly over into the economy. Right now, independent taxation allows the Baltics to set those highly competitive, low-flat taxes we talked about earlier. But the federalization push includes a move toward unified EU taxation to create a standardized playing field across Europe. As it stands, 13 states want this unified system, while 14 states, including Lithuania, want to keep their independent, unique tax codes to remain attractive to foreign investors. It is a razor-thin divide on exactly how the future of Europe should be managed. All of this leaves us with a crucial question to ponder. Can the Baltic Tigers maintain their unique competitive edge in an increasingly centralized Europe? They have already proven themselves to be some of the most resilient, adaptable economic underdogs in history, transforming Soviet collapse into high-tech, modern prosperity. But as the rules of the European game potentially change, will they continue to thrive? Thank you for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.